so that you guys can get as much time with Sam as possible, who's graciously agreed to come and do this very exclusive coaching session. So obviously Sam needs no introduction. I think many of you probably saw him at our June event, and he agreed to come back and do an exclusive coaching session because that was more of a fireside chat. This time he's actually going to teach us some of the magical things inside his head. But Sam, really excited to have you today. And then will you be sticking around for a little bit for the tournament, or TBD?
TBD. My son was crying like crazy when I
Oh,
left
no.
because he's a little under the weather. So I need to get the update from my wife
Okay.
after the talk.
Sounds good. Well, fingers crossed that everything's okay.
Yeah.
But yeah, Sam, we'll just pass it off to you.
The first thing I would like to say is, if you have any questions, don't be shy. This is your time as much as it is anyone's time, so I want you to get the best experience. So truly, any questions, if you want me to repeat something, if anything's unclear, just ask and I'll be happy to answer. Try my best at least. So today we'll be talking about the value of position and how to exploit it. I think for sort of at any level of poker, but especially beginner poker players, at least I remember when I was starting off, people would say, hey, position's really important, and I would understand sort of why, and people would repeat it, and I would repeat it, but it took me quite a long time to really understand the exact nuances of how position helps and how you can use it in your game in all the different ways you can. So the first thing I want to say is I like, with any of these sorts of exercises to kind of return to first principles. So the main thing in poker is that acting last is an advantage, which might seem self-evident, but again, it's not always the case in every game. Like if you were to play rock, paper, scissors, where one person acted first and one person acted last, acting last would be a really big advantage. You'd win every time. But in like chess, the player who moves first has a small advantage and wins more often. In tennis, the player who's serving, has an advantage because they can serve an ace and they have more chances to hit winners, and they tend to win more points. And football overtime, NFL overtime, I should say, is another good example because there's been big debates about trying to change the rules, talk about which rules are fair, which rules are not. Should a coin flip determine who gets the ball first? And it all stems from the fact that it's understood that going first has a big advantage and allows you to win more often. So I think I want to just make it clear that acting last is an advantage and explain why. So one is a game of kind of, well, each decision winnows the possible hands you can have and the possible hands your opponent can have, and with each action, information is transmitted between each players, and then from that, you can make assessments about what your opponent's hand is. And acting last is always an advantage because then when you're acting, you will have, just as in tennis, it's the opposite. By serving, you have an extra point where you can win the point, an extra chance to win the point. In poker, when you're in position, you will always have one more piece of information whenever you act, and that's useful. The other thing is you get to determine when the hand ends. That's the other big one, of course, which is, if you have a mediocre hand and you're out of position, you can't just be like, check, the hand's over. If you're in position, you have the ability to do that. And then the other one is in multi-way pots, this can be amplified because when you check, you might get 2, 3, 4 pieces of information before it comes back to you, which is huge because that gives you, you're getting that information for free when you check. So I'll get into some specific hand examples, but first I just wanted to be like, hey, yeah, that acting last is an advantage, and to push back on that a little just to make sure that it's true. So we can start with the easiest sort of example of this, which is on the river. Position matters, which is if you're out of position, you can't always bluff. you might have a bad hand, and maybe you're worried your opponent made a hand. Maybe it's a very good card for your opponent's range. Maybe you just have like the wrong blockers or whatever, and you can't always bluff. Well, if you're in position, you always at least have the opportunity to bluff. I mean, I guess technically if you're out of position, you do always have the opportunity, but out of position basically on the river, the game they were playing is sort of like if you arrive to the river with nothing, should I bluff? Should I try to bet this guy off the hand? Or am I worried they might have something? Well, when they check, then a lot of times if you're in position, you can just go, well, maybe they missed. I have nothing. You at least have that ability to bet. And then the same thing is also if you've like a middle of range hand in position, like you've like third pair or second pair, it's like, well, now you can just check it in the hand and hope you're good. And then the final one is if you have the nuts, you are guaranteed that you can bet on the river. Well, out of position, like sometimes you might need to check call lead, or like, you know, even if you bet twice, maybe you go, okay, maybe I can want to check shove on the river, maybe I want to bet myself. But in position with like a great hand, there's no concern about your ability to get money in the pot. You'll always be able to. So the two examples I'm going to focus on here using GTO Wizard sims are under the gun versus the button. This. Hold on, sorry guys. Still the time. I think.
Did you need to exit the PowerPoint?
Yeah, I didn't need to exit presentation mode.
Yeah. And then.
Yeah.
There you go.
Okay. So under the gun button, if it's king 8-4, and you have here under the gun bets 20% pot, so they bet they're 50 big blinds deep. He bets they bet 1.4 big blinds. The button calls. The turns a jack. They bet 83% pot, which is 8.2 big blinds call, and the river is a 4. Well, if it's checked to you. Sorry, I think. Yeah. Well, hold on, Victor. What if you could just connect it here and I'll just
I got you.
talk about it for a second. So
Yep.
king 8-4, jack 4, under the gun button, under the gun bets twice. If you say floated the flop with 10-9 or queen 10 and you're the button, you turn an open ender, you call again, and the river is a brick, your opponent checks to you and you go, okay, great, I have 10 high, I have queen high. If my opponent had a hand like say ace 10, ace queen, I can bluff. They bet twice, they gave up, they checked. I might still lose to his bluffs. Maybe on the 4 they'll make like a big fold, and maybe they'll do something like fold top pair. Maybe if they betted jack twice, you can get them to fold. Whatever it is, if you have a hand like 10 high or like 5-6, 6-7, something like that, the lower gut shots, you'll be able to bluff them off them. That's the value of position. Well, if you're out of position, you run into the much sense as a play. So there we go. Perfect timing. So yeah, like and ace queen, the purple is all in. They go all in sometimes on the river, but they give up and check a decent amount. And here even Queen 10 gives up, here 10-9 gives up a little as well, and when they check, then if you are the in-position player and you have Queen 10 or 10-9, then you just automatically win the hand. Or if you make it the other way, and you go, while it loads, I mean, it's not going to be surprising what the outcome is. It's just that, yeah, sometimes you check call Queen 10 and 10-9 out of position, and when that happens, yeah, then you just check call, you lose on the river to an ace queen or an ace 10, or even a much like worse bluff, like ace 2, ace 3, all sorts of stuff. Well, when you're in position, if you have a bad hand, you are capable of bluffing it. The other example I think is a good one here is if you look on kind of like sort of double flush draw connected boards that have a lot going on for them, where the in-position player is a really big advantage because they get to know, because they know when they have a good hand and they know when they have a bad hand and they know when they have a medium strength hand, and the boards change so often. With the out-of-position player, you need to be concerned about, well, am I just betting into sort of like the nuts, or am I betting into a really good hand when the board changes? So, on this board, 10-5-4, spade, heart, if the turn of the ace of spades, 2 flush draws, lots of straight draws. Well, if you're out of position and you have hearts and they miss and spades comes on the river, it's hard to win the pot. But if you have hearts and the spade comes on the river and your opponent checks, it's like, okay, now I can represent hearts when the spades fill, now I can represent spades when the hearts fill. It gives you like this ability to win the hand by being in position, whereas out of position, again, in order to actually bluff with some of these no equity hands, you need to just kind of take the lead and lead all in, or lead some sort of reasonable size so we can get bluffs, and that's like a pretty dangerous play. Like, it makes sense sometimes if you have a really bad hand, maybe you're just like, I want to lead all in, but that's more of an emotional thing than a strategic thing. So an example here is if you go, this is 80 big blinds deep, low jack was button, the low jack bets the part on the flop, gets called by the button, and if you look here, if you look at the EVs of the two different hands, what you'll see here is, sorry, bet, call, so So if you look at 7-6 here, in the bottom corner there, you have 7-6 of spades has an EV of 7 and a pot of 12, 7-6 of hearts, 6.33, so those are the two flush draws. Diamonds, 2.76, clubs, 2.76. The actual numbers don't matter that much for what I'm trying to prove here, which is, if you look at the, if you can remember them, but you can trust me on it if you can't remember the exact values. The in-position player, exact same hands, exact same board, but they have higher EVs for every single one of them. 7.61, 6.8, 3.28, 3.28. And you especially see it with the diamonds and clubs, where they gain a ton of EV, and the reason for that is because if the river is a spade or a heart, which is half the deck, then it's kind of dangerous to bluff a hand with no spade, no heart in your hand, when your opponent should have a bunch of suited hands, a bunch of potential flushes. Bluffing with a hand like 7-6 of clubs, even though it has no chance to win the hand at showdown, I mean, yeah, like you would need to be up against like 6-3 or something. It's a pretty dangerous play where if your opponent checks, then if you have 7-6 of clubs, you kind of have the green light. So even here, you'll see Queen of Spades. So what you'll see is a little bit of call. Yeah, what you'll see here is mostly 7-6 gives up when the spades fell, and when it does bluff, it. Oh, hold on. Sorry, I'm at the wrong. So, okay, 7-6 does not give up. It does bluff, but it's still not as high EV because the imposition player gets the privilege of, choosing when to bluff. The other, so 7-6 here, it knows that it doesn't have the best hand. And you look at the Queen of Spades river, which fills a bunch of draws as well. Like the other dynamic here is, let's say the river is, let's say the 9 of clubs. Now what you'll see is here a hand like King Jack of Spades, King Jack of Hearts, they all give up as out of position. Not out of position yet. They all.
This is in position.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah. Nevertheless, same thing. They give up mostly out of position, spades and hearts, and then if you go to the in position player, then they again have the ability now to bluff, these sorts of hands that the out of position player would give up, because there we go. Queen Jack is. If you're out of position, you're not interested in bluffing with a hand like. You're not necessarily interested in bluffing with a hand with Queen Jack that doesn't have great blocker value, that doesn't have a lot going on with it. Well, if you have a hand like Queen Jack, you might just go, well, I just want to get King Jack to fold. I just want to get King Queen to fold. And the other big thing, so we talked about what happens when you have, bottom of range type hands, that it helps for hands like 7-6 to be able to bluff. The other thing here is, let's say you have a middle hand, you have a hand like, say, King 10 on the turn of the imposition player. Well, now you might go, well, the Queen of Spades river sucks. It's not a great river card for King 10. It doesn't appear that good. But you still end up getting to a spot where you can just, like King 10, occasionally with a spade bluffs, but often with a spade bluffs. But without a spade, it still just has 21 to 26% equity, and it's happy to collect that equity. So that's the other big advantage too. If you're in position with a middle of range type hand, you're doing fine. Well, with a hand like King 10 here, you can just show down. Well, the flip side, of course, is if you face like a big overbet all in, then the might need to fold sets, top two, like some very strong hands. So again, if you're in position, it's obviously good if you have a bad hand, because you get like the green light when your opponent checks and you might be able to bluff. You don't necessarily need to worry about bluffing into a capped range. If you have a great hand, like not in this spot, but in the hand I'll go back for in a second, it's great because you're always able to put money in the pot in position if you have a great hand. And if you have a middle of range hand, it's also pretty great, because if you have a middle of range hand, yeah, you just have the ability to just go, well, I check and I hope I'm good.
I have a question, Sam.
Sure.
On the 9 of clubs river, why do we prefer to bluff with Queen Jack and not King Jack?
I think it's just as simple as Queen Jack beats King.
Can get King Jack to fold.
Yeah. Queen Jack loses to King Jack.
And King Jack, is it like expects to be beating Queen Jack, so like they can have Queen Jack, so.
Yeah, and it's not just King Jack, it's also like, King 6 of spades and, King 6 of hearts and like any just random King high hands, King Jack, King Queen, any of the King high flush draws. It's just enough where
they all check back.
Yeah, I mean, that's also a spot too, where if all the draws miss, like here we have two flush draws, two flush draws, two sets of straight draws miss, you just can't bluff everything that misses, otherwise your opponent just has like top pair or whatever, or not even top pair or second pair, and it's just like I check and okay, I call, because it's hard to have a set or two pair or whatever the value betting threshold is.
So you take your stronger hands that could bluff, but you just check them back, and then you take some of your like middling or weaker ones?
Yeah, there are spots like out of position, you tend to want your bluffs to be a little more block oriented. So you kind of need cards that do good things. And in position, it's a lot more like, okay, my hand has no chance to win a showdown, so I need to bluff it. Generally, yeah. The other one here was under the gun small button. If you face a big turn bet here, you'll see pocket eights basically never raises. I mean, it raises a little bit, but even here, I think raising loses a marginal amount of EV, which means that, and I think if you fully convert the sims, they wouldn't lose any EV. And if you make this instead under the gun small blind, same board and same bet sizing. Call. Jack of diamonds. And what you'll see here is eights does a ton of raising, and it needs to do raising because it's worried the opponent might check back the river. This is especially true on sort of the other boards that are a little more connected, where there are cards that could really kill action. And if you're out of position, sort of a card that sort of fills everything that kind of kills a lot of action can seem that is bad because your opponent knows when they have a good hand and when they have a bluffing hand. Well, when you're in position, it's fine because if a card can kill your action, sometimes you get a free showdown, sometimes you get a bluff, sometimes you get a value bet. But here again, it's not like if you were to check all the turn with eights, you're not like leading all in on any rivers. You have to hope your opponent's going to keep bluffing. So that's the other thing about it too, which is if you take a hand like eights here when you're in position, it's like, well, maybe my opponent, if I call the turn in position, maybe my opponents will bluff the river. But if they don't, I can value bet myself. And here you really are banking on, I hope my opponent keeps bluffing or has a value bet. Because there's no way for you to put money in the pot. Again, outside of leading, which is an unconventional play and only used in pretty specific scenarios. Okay. So that's why position matters on the river. You get last action, acting last, not always an advantage in every game, certainly is in poker. But the reason why it matters on the flop and the turn is you set yourself up to play the hand well, and you can really control the pot size in position. One of the things that you may have noticed on the 10-5-4 ace double flush draw board is out of position only bets half pot or so on the turn. And the reason for that is when you're out of position and the board is so dynamic and can constantly change, you don't really have like big polar bluffs. Even like, you go back here, even some of the like, even a lot of like the bill gut shots here, I would like king, queen, queen, jack are mostly checking. Because, and the one that do often heart spade hands. And the reason is because, again, you just, okay, if you have queen of clubs, jack of diamonds here, and you bet the turn, what's your plan outside of like ribbling a straight? There's not that much you can do. You can bluff a blank, which is nice, but again, a blank is about like half the deck. So for the other half of the deck, you need to have a plan, and it's just too hard to do. So you bet a little more linearly, and then it sets yourself up where you're not making the pot so big that it can get stolen away from you on the river.
So you're saying that specific scenario where usually you would see a larger bet on like a double flush board.
Yeah.
That's a specific scenario where you can actually size down, and then not be as polarized.
Yeah, they become boards that are so connected that by betting on the larger side, you you set it up so like the river's hell for you basically, because if you won't, most of the time you'll miss. Well, even if you have a set, you're sort of like, well, if the river's a spade or a heart, you can like block or put in a small bet, but you don't necessarily want to make a big value bet. If you check and face like a big shove, as we saw on the queen of spades, 2 pair and sets are kind of indifferent. So yeah, by making the pot really big out of position on a dynamic board where things change, then you're just opening the door up for trouble.
Got it. But then in position, you still want to go for like the bigger size.
Well, in position, there's a couple of things that are going on. One, you can bet a lot more polar in position, and you'll have these kind of like a lot more like kind of just total AO kind of bluffs. You'll see here. The irony of this board is because everything filled, right? You don't have these like crazy like nothing bluffs, but like even if you look at like pocket threes and pocket twos, they're bluffing often, and they would be hands that even with a gut shot or like the fives are another good one here. Like 6-5 of diamonds is bluffing a lot. Where like out of position would just go 6-5 of diamonds is a bad hand. I check fold them done with the hand. Well, in position can kind of just go for it and bluff some sort of more speculative, weaker hands. And a lot of what's going on is that, in position really does have the ability to kind of control the hand. They can control if the pot's bigger or smaller. And, especially if who's weaker players, that's definitely something where if you're in position, you can use all your tools to make the pot as big as possible when you have a good hand. In position, well, even if you're out of position and have like, if you like flop top set on this board, there's still going to be a bunch of runouts where you're like not that crazy about it out of position. So, well, in position, you really kind of have, against weaker players can really control the whole pot from start to finish. So the two hands I want to look at here are Leon Storm hands from the main event. I don't know if you guys know who Leon is, but he's he's like a top pro, plays everything online and live. So I think this hand ends up being like 5-6 minutes, so I'm just going to quickly go through it. But the button raises to 5K. Leon called ace 10 in the small blind. We are not quite in the money in the main event, not even close. Ace king 7, and the Gonu guy, I don't know that much about it, if we're being honest, but I think he's some sort of recreational player, and they are, you can see up there, 292, 593, so Gonu start the hand like 150 deep, or 125, and Leon like 240. So Gonu c-bets on the smaller side here with 10-9. Leon raises to 9. Gonu floats him with his backdoor straight, one card straight and flush draws. The turn to the ace of clubs, so now Gonu has the 9 of clubs in his hand. Leon blocks, he bets 14, I think, into 33. And Gonu raises to 30K, almost min raise. Are we getting an ad? And Leon calls, and then we go with the 2 of spades. Check. He faces a bet of 40K, and Leon ends up folding it. Yeah. Well, so the thing about this hand, which I suspect Leon knows, but it could be wrong about, is, and we'll see in the GTO Wizard Sim, is Gonu is supposed to play a polarized flop betting strategy versus small blind defense range on ace king 7, which means he's supposed to bet on the larger side and not bet that often. This is a pretty normal shape on ace king X boards because you will have hands like pocket queens or king or bad top pair type hand that don't want to put a lot of money in the pot. So what you do have, he had this advantage where he has aces, kings, ace king that Leon never has, even like hands like ace queen. And this is especially true if we raised from earlier position. But Leon still should have a bunch of kind of medium hands, be they like suited kings, ace-10, whatever. So what you'll see here is that the flop c-betting strategy mimics that, where the biggest sizes uses 150 most commonly, 166%. And yeah, like ace-king always bets, kings, sevens, aces actually mostly traps, which is funny. But the point of this hand is Leon recognized something, I think, in game, which is he probably saw, especially if you go back to the timing, the Gonu kind of bet quickly and in a way that probably indicates that he's just c-betting everything on the flop, or most of his range on the flop to the small size, and he's not using a big size. And then what you get, would probably get in a solver output if you force the small blind to c-bet, is you would start getting these kind of linear check raises as a response from Leon, where you get, he check raises, strong top pair hands to get, weak top pair and second pair and just pocket jacks or flush draws or whatever to put money in the pot. But even here, when you have one of the best players in the world, I don't want to say too much about, I don't know anything about this guy. I looked at his handed mob when the hand happened, and like he got the best of Leon in this hand. But Leon was clearly trying to kind of exploit a guy who he thought had the wrong c-bet strategy. I'm sure Leon is a more, honestly, he's so young that he might not even be a more experienced poker player, but a more studied poker player than him. And he found this exploit on the flop, but he still gets in this trouble because he's out of position. He made the pot big. And a way you could think of it is, oh, Leon just got a little unlucky that a club rolled off, which I think is true, but also a club, a queen, a jack, even a 10 is like, if a lot of money starts going in the pot, is not great for Leon. A king, a 7, like now you're suddenly at the point where it really is a lot of the board. So even if you think, oh, I'm playing this guy, I'm much better than him, I'm trying to exploit something from him, when you're deep and when you're out of position, boards can still get hairy and you can still get in trouble, which is why I didn't plan for this, but tying into Victor's question about the other board, like, yeah, you do need to just have a little bit of backup when you're playing out of position, because when the board gets hairy, you want to at least be able to have turn something, like a flush draw, a straight draw, a key block, or like, something a little more. Because if you just put money out of position kind of with a hand like pretty good top pair, or even in his case on the turn, pretty good trips, you can just get in a lot of trouble. So the other hand is one where Leon, well, I mean, in some ways get the best of his opponent, but in another way, his opponent get the best of him. But this is day, there's 92 left. It's in the video. Oh, day 6. Day 6 of the main event here. Yeah, the hand is on of all Kasufi boards. So back in scene, I think his first name was Josh. Apologies. Raises the cutoff. Leon calls Queen Jack off on the button. That's 120k big blind, and back in scene has 7 million, and Leon has 4.35, as you can see top right corner there. And Beckenstein bets 350k into 800. Leon calls. The turn of the 3 of diamonds. Beckenstein bets 750k. Leon calls. The river, the 8 of hearts. They have pot to play. Beckenstein checks. Leon ends up. I think they get. I try to figure out, because the graphics. You'll see. They say he bet 625, and I guess he does. Because I guess that's his bet right there. It's a weird bet size for Leon, and Beckenstein ends up folding. It's a big fold. And this, I think, kind of just ties into, even though here Beckenstein, you could say, hey, he had the best hand on the flop, best hand on the turn, put in money with the best hand both times, and then check folded to small bet. When he no longer had the best hand, he played it perfectly. And while that is true, I do think it also just showed the dangers of kind of making pots big out of position when there aren't that many clean runouts for you. Like here, you know, I keep doing the thing where I counter the cards, but I do think it goes to show kind of how difficult it can be to have a clean runout here. Because here you have obviously, you know, a heart 10 or heart 9, you know, some of the lower straight cards like the 8 perhaps, and then ace, king, jack. So that's just like a ton of cards, and you need to fade them twice. And the other thing is, as more and more money goes in the pot, it's more and more likely that like one of these scary cards kind of hits Leon. So here Beckenstein did like, he played the hand fine. You see, like he does get bets. Like Queen 10 is a hand that gets in there and bets 83% pot of the size. Used mostly with Queen 10 off. It's fine. But overall, he checks a lot. And I think that's always important to do is, there are these spots, again, where it seems like, hey, when you have kings, queens, kings and aces, and the other guy doesn't really have it, you have this huge range advantage. But you really don't. It's 50-50. You have a lot more very strong hands. The 50-50, you can see my cursor hiding. There we go. Again, just playing out of position is hard, and you will just have these hands like king 6 of diamonds or just these total AO kind of hands. And even when you have these hands that are capable of, you know, they're pretty good hands, but sometimes with a pretty good hand, you just want to play kind of a medium-sized pot. And when you start betting the flop, you're kind of committing yourself in some ways to playing a pretty big pot, which is fine if the board runs out clean, but when it doesn't, you're going to be in a lot of trouble. So even though he did play it well, I picked this hand. You know, partially I wanted to be, didn't want to just show a hand where Leon lost. But also, like, this was just a common theme I noticed when I was watching a lot of the World Series main event coverage, which is people are betting kind of on a hope. And the hope is like, hey, maybe I'll just end the hand right now. I have the best hand right now. I'm going to bet and I'm going to win the pot because I have the best hand. And that's not really the way to think of it. You need to think further down the street, because when the pots get bigger, or when like the biggest mistakes can be made, when the most money is won and lost. So what might seem like just a small bet on the flop might end up leading to like the river bet being twice as big.
So how would you have played the hand differently as the out of position player?
I mean,
spots?
Okay, with Leon with ace 10, I would have just called the flop.
Check call.
I would have considered raising if I had like a backdoor. Well, I guess, yeah, okay. So he couldn't have ace with the backdoor flush draw. But even if he had like the 10 of clubs, just that little bit of backup, like, because let's say he check raised in the turn with like the 4 of clubs, just a total brick club. Well, you check and he bets the turn. You might just need to check fold. So in that spot, I would, yeah, just wait for a slightly better hand to check raise. Just a hand with a little more protection, a little more backup. Also, like, there was a relatively large difference between like ace 10 through ace queen on the flop. Just because it doesn't seem like that much, but like if you're betting ace 10 on the turn, you go, well, what are the hands you're trying to get value out of? And a lot of them are worse aces. And then just being able to beat one more worse ace is actually, or in the case of ace 10, you know, 2 more, or yeah, or in the case of ace queen with ace 10 on that board, 2 more is quite substantial. Because by the time you get to the river, if we want to talk about like winnowing ranges, it gets to a point where if you have ace queen, like ace 10 could be something like 5% of like worse hands that call you bet. And then if you turn that 5% into 5% loser, like if you flip it, so when you have ace 10, then you have 5% losers, that's really costly.
Do you think Leon is less apt to check raise that flop if he opened from any other position?
Yeah, I think he did it.
Because of his button open.
But again, then it is just a calibration game of being like, well, maybe if you raise from the hijack, maybe you wouldn't raise ace jack on the flop. Or if you raise from the cutoff, you would raise ace jack. But I still think the key thing is you want a little more like robustness.
Turns are going to be better for you with the 10
Yeah.
clubs.
And like the other big one too is if it doesn't apply on this board, but if you could have the suited aces that have the backdoor, then that's really nice because then you just get like
You can just continue every turn.
you can continue on
A lot more.
and also you have a chance of like winning a massive pot once you check rate the flop. So, yeah, like if you had whatever on this flop, if you had king queen of spades, then there are like the runouts where it's like, okay, now I made the nuts, that's great. Well, if you had ace queen with the queen of clubs, even if the board ran out club, you obviously have a very strong hand, but it's not like a hand you're raising over a limbo bet with necessarily if you have the second nuts or if the board peels or something like that. Yeah, so tying into this, I will say, like, I think this is the biggest leak I've seen. I see at mid-stakes, which is people bet too much. And it used to be, I think, pretty common what happened was people would fold too much. People would occasionally float, but floating was seen as a sort of like a once-in-a-while play. And people weren't doing it systematically. And now with solvers and tools, and again, even if you're not like studying with solvers or you think you're not playing in games with people who are studying in solvers, all these plays trickle down. And like if you look at like a random like 1-2 game in a casino like 20 years ago, whereas now the play would be different, the types of play would be different, it would all be different. It's not, I'm not saying it's full like a hard game or anything, but I'm just saying all these things do end up trickling down. You know, the amount of time I'll sometimes hear people talking about poker who are like, you know, not serious poker players, are not good, but they can talk about it with this kind of fluency of like, oh, blockers and backdoors and you know, like not like minimum defense frequency, maybe not that. But all these things do trickle down, and it used to be, I think, kind of that there were a class of people who played post-flop, or if they didn't have like a pair or like an active draw, they would fold. And now I think most people are like, hey, if I have somebody bets quarter pot and I have queen jack of clubs and there's the 10 of clubs on board, I'm seeing a turn. And it used to be that wasn't always the case, so auto betting made a lot of money, especially kind of with middle of range type hands, because some people just wouldn't bluff either if they missed. Like if I bet sixes on 10-5-4 rainbow, somebody called with queen jack of clubs and the turn is like a king and queen jack of clubs turns an open ender, yeah, then they might start bluffing. But if the turn were like a 3, no, people wouldn't bluff queen jack. They would just go, oh, I like missed my float, and they would fold. So it used to be that if you bet a lot, you would. The other thing is when you bet quarter pot, like you really do need. Like I'm just picking this one here. If you look at okay, even this isn't great because it's a big C bet size, but we can go with it. Even here with the 83% pot C bet, which is a pretty big size, obviously you still continue over half the time, or 60% of the time. So it was just, people were just never hitting those sorts of frequencies, you know, like they just weren't, and that made auto betting very profitable. So what I'm seeing a lot is like sort of like hope betting, where again I described it earlier. They just want to win the hand. They just want the hand to be over. They think they have the best hand now, and they're afraid of getting sucked out on. And that is not like a way to play a strategic game. You're playing it out of a sense of fear, where you go like, I'm just worried that my opponent might catch up. But the problem is, like, anytime you're betting in that sort of way, you're paying the bill. I remember like way back when Phil Galfond had a video, and he talked about how like there were times where he would have whatever like $1,000 in his stack playing online, and he would run a big bluff, and then after the hand he would have like $1,400 in his stack, and he would be like, but I just went all in. Like, I went all in for all my chips. Like, it feels like I should have more in my stack. It feels like I should have won more. And then he's like, oh, right, I put You know, if I shove the river for 800 into 800, 400 of that is money that I put in the pot already. I'm just getting my own money back that I put in there. So when pots get big, like, you need to consider where all that money's coming from, and if you are sort of betting for information or betting for protection or whatever, you're the one paying the bill. That's kind of like a big thing that I don't think people always realize. That they think it's like, oh, I found out my hand isn't good. It's like, okay, but you paid to find that out. Like, if in a cash game, if somebody did that, like, sort of like off the table, would you like, hey, would you pay $200 right now to see if, you know, this guy has, like, you beat right now? People wouldn't do it, but people are comfortable, like, raising to $200 to go, you know, it's like insurance almost, but they don't think of it that way because it's presented as a strategic option. And like, but the psychology of it is kind of insurance. So now, yeah, I want to sort of talk about, you know, how you can exploit and use position to your advantage. So if you're in position and your opponent bets too much, the easier thing to do is play back at them, which means a lot of raising, a lot of, you know, if there are out people who just think they're, hey, it's my board, so I get a C-bet, and they're, you know, out of position, and they might not necessarily have a big range advantage, and it might be kind of like 50-50-ish. Raising anything like decent can just work out fine. Sometimes you're just raising to get cheap showdown. Sometimes any of the like reasonable kind of like bluffing combos, whether they're like draws or gut shots or kind of second or third pair type hands that block, you know, like top two and sets and stuff like that, are good. And it really does put a lot of pressure on people because, you know, if you looked at the board here, I give the example here. I think I loaded up that low jack button, ace 10-6. Flush draw, if I think you'd see something like this is pretty normal in a lot of the games people play. Well, people would bet hands like King Queen or King Jack or Queen Jack here on ace 10-6, like, you know, most of the time. It would be the standard play with it. And then in solver land, where somebody is kind of playing appropriately tight and checking, you know, 64% of the time on the flop, you don't really want to raise too many of these sorts of like weak top pair hands or second pair type hands or whatever. But if you're playing with somebody who's just auto betting when they have top pair, auto betting when they have just like a piece of the board, then all these raises become pretty great because you'll see here, like, people are betting hands like King Queen or King Jack or pocket kings or like random pairs of tens, kind of with the hope that they're not going to, or even again the bad top pair here, they're betting it with the plan of, oh well, I probably won't get raised, so I'm just going to bet and figure it out. But then if you start putting pressure on people who are betting too much, then again you have the ability to control the pot on later streets. You get them to fold a bunch right away, or if they're not folding a bunch right away, then you just get somebody who every time they flop a gut shot on this flop is putting 9 big blinds in the pot, you know, which is a pretty good type of poker player to be playing against. So in position, I think most people who are over betting, you do want to just start raising a bunch. You want your hands to be within like a reasonable realm. You know, you don't want to just start raising like, you know, nothing. Part of what you're trying to exploit here is the fact that they're betting too much kind of middle of range type stuff that doesn't really know what to do versus raise. And when somebody bets too much middle of range type stuff, then if you kind of respond with aggression, even if it is also the similar class of hands, the fact that you're in position will allow you to, you know, get a better sense of what's going on, force flop folds right away, maybe set up some big turn and river bluffs, maybe just showdown a winner, depending on exactly what your class of hand you raise. And the other one here is that strategically being out of position is a disadvantage, as we went through, but it's the way a lot of people play in position. Being out of position, you can turn it on its head and make an advantage pretty quickly. So an example here is if we check, same board, same situation, you'll see 66% check from the button, and even here like hands like ace queen, hand like ace jack, majority check. It really is a very poor little betting range that is kind of focused around ace 10, 10s, sixes, some draws as well. And if you're playing with opponents who are just going to like auto bet every time they have top pair because you check to them, then that's another way how you can just, you're getting more information because you check and then they bet and then they're like, okay, now I found out information about their hand. If you check and they check back, oftentimes with a certain type of player, it means they're like done with the hand. They just don't have, they're going to fall to a turn bet a ton. Especially, even if they're trying to play kind of balanced, they're probably rarely going to hit the level of like weird sort of computer bluffing where they're like blasting off with pocket twos or those sorts of hands. So in theory, being in position is obviously great, but the way a lot of people play, where they do play very straight up, being out of position, you're still getting that information, and that's what matters. You'd rather sort of, you can exploit that information for more money in position, but being out of position, you still have the ability to kind of play that game of getting the information for free. And again, when you check, you get, you know, you don't pay for it. You check, they bet, and you can kind of go from there. So I would say, like, being in position, you want to use your sort of exploit players' tendencies by really putting a lot of pressure on them. And being out of position, I often feel what you actually want to do is put pressure on them by check raising them because they're just going to bet too much, or betting a lot in check lines, stuff like that, because they're going to usually let you know if they have a decent piece of the board. And again, also, you know, if you check and somebody like confidently is like $8, whatever, you know, $50, you can just fold. You don't need to deal with exploiting their. Part of it can be check folding as well. And then the final thing before we open it up for questions, I just wanted to talk a little about multi-way pots, because the thing about when you're starting off, realistically, like, you just don't play that many heads-up pots. It's a lot more like 4 or 5-way family-style pots. And like the way beginners kind of play multi-way pots is if, you know, you have aces and you raise and get called by 4 people and the flop's 8, 7, 6. And people, again, they're so worried about the turn being like a 5 or a 9 or a 10 or a 7, 8, 6 or, you know, flush draw, filling card, that their instinct is they want to bet big with aces. They want to knock everyone out and see where their hand's at. When really, it's kind of the opposite, especially in these games where you can check and then wait to see what interest other people have in the hand. Oftentimes you can just check fold. Like if it goes check, bet, raise, you can just fold aces. Because even that's a spot where, like, even if you're getting like bluffed, it's often like getting bluffed by like 8, 9 or something that has a ton of equity versus you. If it checks through and the turn is one of the like bad cards for you, that's great. You didn't put any money in the pot and there's a really bad turn for you. Like I always use this example, but if you had ace king of clubs under the gun and somebody told you the flop was going to be 5, 6, 7 all outs, you would just fold. You would have a bad hand in this version of poker. Similarly, yeah, if you have aces and somebody told you, hey, the final board's, you have black aces and the final board's going to have 5, 6, 7, 8 all outs, you're like, okay, I'm done. Like, bad hand. I don't want any part in this. So I think that this feel of like something bad happening, but the bigger problem is that you're paying when you put a bunch of money in the pot and then the board gets bad for you. That's a lot more costly than waiting for something safe to happen. So I think that's, I mean, there's kind of a weird thing to like tag on at the end. It's all been about heads up pots, but I think it all multi-way pots are interesting because the way you're out of position can be like all the effects of sort of being patient when you're out of position and not trying to build a big pot and not trying to do that increase as there's more and more players have position on you, because it's more likely somebody will continue. It's more likely that like they'll be able to put the screws to you. So especially the reality in like a lot of the games that people are playing when they're out, it's like just check. I mean, this is like something I've learned in like short tech and PLO, where you just check and then wait to see what happens, and then again when it comes back to you, now you have 3, 4, 5 extra pieces of information, and now you can reassess if your hand's good. And even that's true with good hands, because if other people are playing that kind of game, like if you're playing in a game where people love betting, with ace-8 on 8-7-6 to make sure that it like clears out equity, and you flop the nuts, it's like, okay, great, check. I'm going to get all the money from this guy when they have ace-8, because they're going to put in a big bet for me. Maybe they'll get calls behind, and then maybe once I check raise when it gets back to me, they'll fold, but maybe they'll make a big mistake. So yeah, that's kind of the trend there on multi-way pots, especially. It's much easier to or like much more important to be in control of and have a strong understanding of position.
So I think we have like maybe 10-15 minutes for questions, so whoever has questions for Sam.
I have a question.
Sure.
So, you do the series for Fund of the Day.
Yes.
Have you seen if there's more from out of position or in position? Where are the points coming from?
That's a good question. Yeah, at some point I was doing that, but I'm not sure. I don't know.
If you had to answer that, would it be more from out of position?
I feel like it'd be from in position. Gives you the green light. Yeah.
I think the problem is there just ends up being population tendency things going on there, which is, I guess in theory I should be roughly 50-50 playing pots in position as out of position. I don't know. That's a good question. It feels like a lot of the pots, just the nature of them were single raise pots with the big blind, and then it's like, well, I was either big blind this hand or was I the pre-flop raise with this hand, Yeah.
Do you think GTO Wizard is the best solver?
Oh, I mean, they're recording this as a solver. I think it's not very good. I think it's a good library.
But like, I've used it for studying. Sometimes I look at some spots and like, I'm like, I would never do this in game situations.
No, no. I mean, it gives you close outputs to all the other solvers. They don't converge as well. This is getting recorded, so I hope I'm not too wrong about the technical part of it, because I don't know anything.
We can cut this out.
I don't know anything about computer science or anything. But my understanding is like PIO and those type solvers, they use an algorithm that mathematically shows that both strategies are unexploitable for each player. And what GTO Wizard does is they calculate the EV of a decision at each node, and then they have an AI that plays a strategy based on what the EV was. So GTO Wizard, when they're playing the flop, is not seeing down to the river, it's just seeing the EVs of each step independently, and that's why they have a gigantic library, and why you can look up every board, and why you can do all that, because that's like the shortcut they're taking, so they can run every board with like 12 different sizings. But I mean, if you just take a random GTO Wizard output and run it in like PIO to full unexploitability, you will see like bet sizes totally converge out. You'll see things like that.
And then I guess HRC is pretty accurate as far as like it's similar to PIO as far as
No, HRC is the same. My understanding, but push fold is different, but HRC is also just kind of like Monte Carlo self play. I don't think there was like a level of mathematical. The reality is, for any multi-way solver, which most HRC solves would be, because you're starting with a 3-4-way pre-flop hand, they need to use abstractions. Basically, because they can't do a complete solve, and even all the multi-way tools, even the strongest ones, whatever, it's all kind of made up. Like there's no. It gives you through self-play, different strategies that converge to a solution that's close enough where like they aren't interested in altering their strategy, but it is not like the heads-up ones where they can actually like mathematically prove that they're at an equilibrium and neither player would be interested in changing their strategy.
So would you recommend PIO as to study more so than PTO?
It depends what you want. The reality is for most people, getting like pretty good outputs, of which there's like a gigantic library, is much better than being able to be like, oh, like I knew that we were supposed to bet 83% pot on the flop instead of like 65% pot. So for most people, just having a big library that kind of shows you the shape of what a strategy looks like is probably the best.
Yeah, because you can't memorize every spot anyways.
No.
So what happens when you're in position, or no, so you're out of position, but you flop like the nuts, like something really good.
Yeah.
Like, walk me through your strategy is like from when it comes to betting and building a pot, because like you've got the absolute best hand.
It depends on what kind of nuts you have, because like, if you have king queen on jack 10 9 2 hearts, it's like, well, yeah, you have the nuts, but again, a lot of times in the river you won't have the nuts. So like it's a very strong hand now, but how it rolls off with the board pairs or whatever. Usually I'm thinking in terms of like range strategy. So sometimes like if you raise under the gun and the button calls and you're deep, you usually pure check range on like boards like 6-5-4, because the button can kind of just put a lot of pressure on you. You're going to have a lot of like unpaired big cards, all that. So if I had 7-8 there, I check, right? Because it's like, but if I raised under the gun and the button called and the flop was, like that hand, I mean he raised on the button, but whatever, like that Gondo Leon hand, and I flop top 2 middle set, then I'm betting big, So it just depends too much on the board and the specific hands. I mean, like the classic kind of like nut type hand that you can just kind of pile money in the pot with his bottom set on like kind of like 10-5-2 or whatever, any of those kinds of boards, because hey, your opponent can have top pair and you have bottom set, you have a great hand and you don't really block any of your opponent's call hands.
Hi everyone, Sam. So